A Trump-appointed federal judge issued a nationwide ban on a common abortion pill, escalating the GOP's war on reproductive rights and setting the stage for a clash with the Biden administration before the United States Supreme Court. Intrigued? Then click that like and subscribe and enjoy the video. So contrary to what your religiously conservative family members and friends might tell you, the right to have an abortion, some level of abortion access, is extremely popular in the United States, even in red states. We saw it all throughout 2022 after the Dobbs decision by the United States Supreme Court, which overturned Roe v. Wade. You even had referendums in places like Kansas and Kentucky, where it was overwhelmingly made clear that the majority of citizens, even in those conservative states, do not support abortion bans. Some restrictions, sure. But a widespread abortion ban, the way that conservatives and Republicans want, absolutely not. And it's part of the reason why the Republican Party underperformed so spectacularly in the November 2022 midterms, and arguably one of the reasons why in the recent Wisconsin Supreme Court race, why Judge Janet Protasiewicz just blew Daniel Kelly out of the water, in large part because people, certainly liberals, certainly leftists, but even moderates and even a surprising number of conservative constituents and voters support the right to have access to an abortion. Okay? So what we have here is recently a Trump-appointed federal judge out of Texas named Matthew Kacsmaryk issued a nationwide ban of an abortion drug called mifepristone. Okay? Now the order has stayed for 7 days, so the FDA can appeal. But if this goes into effect, and it was enforced, then Walgreens, CVS, any pharmacy could not sell this very common abortion drug. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. Let's see. So, just for some facts from Planned Parenthood about this particular drug. It works by blocking the hormone progesterone. Without progesterone, the lining of the uterus breaks down and the pregnancy cannot continue. Medication abortion is extremely effective in ending early pregnancy, working 95 to 99% of the time. It gives patients the option to end their pregnancy at home or in another setting in which they feel comfortable, while still providing them with the medical support and information they need. Okay, so that's basically the TLDR on this particular drug. It got FDA approval in the year 2000, so it's been in common circulation for the past 23 years. I mean, it's everywhere, okay? Now, what makes this even more complicated is that a ruling from a similar case occurred from a federal judge out of Washington, which is mutually exclusive. It's in direct contradiction to the right-wing Trump-appointed Matthew Kacsmaryk's position out of Texas. Whoa, a Washington judge just issued a dueling injunction prohibiting the FDA from pulling mifepristone off the market. It directly conflicts with Kacsmaryk's decision. Okay, so right now we have a situation where a conservative, young, right-wing, radical, Trump-appointed federal judge out of Texas wants to pull this very common, very popular drug from the shelves and is ordering the FDA to do it nationwide, not just in Texas, nationwide. Nationwide ban on abortion. Then you have a competing injunction from a federal judge of equal rank out of Washington, which is saying, no, FDA, you cannot do that. So you have two mutually exclusive orders, and this will likely set the stage for a Supreme Court decision. This will probably escalate it, right? Because the Supreme Court, when there's a contradiction between states or dispute between states, as there is here, Washington and Texas, and dueling mutually exclusive injunctions from two equal federal judges, that's fodder for the Supreme Court. How will the Supreme Court decide? We don't know. On the one hand, it's dominated by a 6-3 regressively conservative supermajority. So on paper, they're probably inclined personally to side with Judge Kacsmaryk, which would be awful. On the other hand, they're probably aware of the fact that that would be profoundly, stupidly unpopular, not just in blue states, not just in blue districts, but in many red states as well. People would be pissed. And so that's probably also a calculation to consider as well. And as much as I dislike this iteration of the Supreme Court, and I do, sometimes they do listen to the winds of popular support, right? Sometimes. So I'm not sure. I'm not a prophet. I don't know how they'll decide. or even if this will make its way to the Supreme Court, but I expect that it will, and I expect it'll do so in a relatively timely fashion. Some additional facts about Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk, who again was a Trump-appointed right-wing reactionary judge. He's a former donor and board member to extremist anti-abortion organizations. He just ruled overturning a 23-year-old FDA-approved drug, right? 4 huge things to know. This is an attempt to ban abortion, period, full stop. Medication abortion is the most common form of abortion, which is true for the reasons that the Planned Parenthood pamphlet described. It allows people to do it early, conveniently, and at home where they're comfortable. They don't have to go to an abortion clinic. They don't have to go see a physician. They're able to do so either in private or surrounded by their loved ones in the privacy of their own home. Okay, it's very common. This is a total power grab disconnected from the law and medical data. He's trying to do something that's never been done before, overturn the FDA's approval of safe, effective medication, which is also true. The ruling doesn't take immediate effect and will be appealed, which President Biden, the Biden administration have said they will appeal this decision. And abortion medication remains available for everyone is incredibly safe, right? Because again, the orders, it won't go into effect 7 days. Probably won't go into effect anyway because there's a competing injunction out of Washington. It will be appealed. So one way or another, it'll make its way before the Supreme Court and in a timely fashion. And in the meantime, it's available for sale. We already established that it would go through the Supreme Court. Oh, and this is another one too. It's good commentary from Chris Hayes, as he points out. So there was somebody on Twitter who said, after a few hours, I've received statements or seen tweets from 26 Senate Democrats opposing the Texas ruling, as well as Democratic governors in blue states saying that they will not, essentially not enforce this particular injunction, that mifepristone will still be available in their states. I've only seen one statement from a Senate Republican celebrating the ruling. This tweet from Mississippi Senator Hyde Smith, who, by the way, is a wacko, right? She is just crazy, okay? But the point is that Kacsmaryk's decision, if you are a right-wing conservative pro-lifer, pro-forced birther, more accurately, then this should be seen as a victory. So why aren't Republicans, elected Republicans, shouting from the rooftops? Why is only this one particular Republican talking about it? Because they know. They especially know after the 2022 midterms, like they are the dog that caught the car. They campaigned for years, we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade, we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Well, they got their wish. You caught the car, now what? And they suffered political consequences ever since. And so as Chris Hayes, MSNBC's Chris Hayes points out, Democrats need to hang this around the neck of every Republican office holder. Can't imagine an issue where the substantive and political stakes are clearer. He's right, this is fodder. Republicans, they know politically, even if they personally profoundly agree with it, they know in this political climate, this is not good news for them. Maybe they can spin it in a way that's good for them, but probably not. The odds are against them on this issue. Democrats need to take the aggressive initiative. They need to, as he said, politically hang this around the necks of every Republican. They need to be asking their Republican colleagues in every debate, in every sort of engagement in the halls of Senate or in the halls of Congress. They need to constantly tie the GOP and their pro-forced birth position with this decision by a judge that they supported in the first place, right? They need to do this. This is good political advice. Now, the other thing I want to point out is this comment by AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, which is getting quite a bit of focus. So let's take a look at it right now.
Has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the courts have the legitimacy and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. It is the justices themselves, through the deeply partisan and unfounded nature of these rulings, that are undermining their own enforcement.
So you're saying the Biden administration should ignore this court, but what does that look like? What does that actually mean?
You know, I think the interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement. And it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
But is that...
So here's my hot take. She's right. Here's the great thing about separation of powers. It is true that the United States Supreme Court is the final arbiter of what is or is not constitutional. But they have no enforcement mechanism, right? The executive branch is what enforces the laws. Various federal agencies, various federal law enforcement groups. The Supreme Court doesn't have a police it can summon. And throughout United States history, and we'll talk about some like recent examples of where Republicans have chosen not to enforce court decisions. The fact of the matter is that throughout United States history, we've seen situations where administrations, for good reasons and bad reasons, have ignored court decisions. President Lincoln, who by most consensus is the greatest American president in the history of this country, in my opinion, he's number 2, but like he is the patron saint of this country alongside George Washington. He routinely ignored court decisions, even Supreme Court decisions during the Civil War when he was prosecuting the war against the Confederacy. And I think we would all agree that he had moral reasons to do it. But the Supreme Court was effectively helpless, again, because they don't have any enforcement mechanism. They rely on the executive branch to enforce it. So I'm with AOC. I think that the Biden administration is doing the right thing by denouncing this and by saying that they'll appeal it. But I think at the end of the day, if for whatever reason the regressively conservative evangelical majority on the Supreme Court decides with this right-wing radical Judge Kaczmarek, I don't think the Biden administration should enforce it at all. I don't think they should. Why should they, right? Number one, public view of the Supreme Court, views of its legitimacy are eroded. The Supreme Court is as unpopular now as it's ever been. People recognize that these people are bought and paid for, that these people are corrupt. My God, look at the video we recently did on Justice Clarence Thomas, right? He has a drip feed into his arm of just dark money cash, Republican cash, that he has never disclosed. This man is corrupt. He's unethical. He's presided over cases involving parties close to him, including his wife, right? When she attempted to support the overthrow of the 2020 election, he was the one. Even the other conservative justices were like, bro, yeah, law enforcement should be able to look at those text messages. And he's like, no. But it was because his wife was among the texters. People recognize that this unelected group of elites, whose views are dangerously out of step with the American public, they're not really legitimate. And they're often deciding things not on any coherent or consistent legal principle, right? Because a lot of these conservatives will say, well, I'm an originalist. I look at the words as they're written. And yet there's so many deep dives on like the New Republic and ProPublica and all sorts of commentary which point out the various inconsistencies of originalist thought. They'll appeal to originalism and what the founding fathers wanted until it's inconvenient, and then they'll not do that. So at the end of the day, I think that the left and the Democrats and the Biden administration should avail themselves of things that Republicans do all the time. We have situations where even in the past 6 years, you had red states ignoring court orders to restore voting rights, where judges issue injunctions or strike down particular voting maps or voting laws, and Wisconsin, for example, or North Carolina, just ignore them, right? Because again, a judge can declare a thing, but it has to be enforced. And Republican states recognize, this judge can't come down here and enforce it himself. All he can do is talk. We have to cooperate in order for a judge's order to take effect. So if Republicans can do that to restrict voting rights in order to rig the game so they can win elections, why can't Democrats ignore court orders that issue wildly unpopular and egregious bans on very common drugs? Why can't we do that? So I'm with AOC on this. I think that it would behoove the Biden administration to try to beat it in court first, right? Try to preserve as much of the institution as we can. But if not, I think the Democrats should play the game exactly as Republicans do. We'll play the game. If we don't like the outcome, we should be able to go, nah, we're going to do it anyway. Hey, you. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And if you absolutely hated the video, the best revenge for you is also to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That'll teach me. If you want to share an opinion or share some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, all right? 2023 is a year of change, hence the aggressive rebrand and commitment to new content. Inspired by my friends Luke Beasley and STV Philly, my personal goal for this channel is to hit 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So I'm hoping you'll do me a solid by spreading the word and the videos to potential fans and hate watchers alike. And in the meantime, we'll be pondering politics again with you very soon.